Est-ce que c'est juicy? Thanks for joining us. You are live with Get Connected. We're talking all about Wi-Fi today. My name is Mike Agarbo. Got John Beeler here. And This is a topic that comes up time and time again. You know, we do national radio shows, we do TV shows, and people are constantly asking us, how can I get better Wi-Fi in my home or office?
So I'm going to start off by saying the problem is probably what the hardware that you already have is.
Yes.
A lot of people, they live with the Wi-Fi that their provider gives them.
Yeah, easy, right?
Yeah, because, and if you have a small place, that's probably fine.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, that'll be fine.
Yeah, small apartment. Although, the big thing I've noticed with talking to a few people, they have a Wi-Fi router from like the 90s.
Yes.
They have never asked for new hardware.
No.
So it's kind of frustrating that the provider is, oh, well, Mike has that old router. We don't need to worry about him.
No.
And you're suffering with substandard Wi-Fi.
Because they're amortizing that and they're getting their money's worth out of it, right?
Yeah. I just see a chat. Shaw has repeaters, easier than mesh. Spoiler alert, a repeater is just a mesh.
Yeah.
And the Shaw one's not that great compared to some of the other options out there.
Have you used the Shaw ones before?
Yeah.
And they're okay? They're better than nothing, right?
Yeah. I mean, I when I switched to Telus, I got the Telus things as well, and they're okay.
Yeah.
But they all have like bright lights on, like LED lights on them, and when they're like having trouble, they change colors.
Yeah.
And I'll walk past the Telus one and like, oh, it's red. I don't use it, so but to have it in the house is like a backup.
Yeah.
But the problem is that these things are only as good as your house layout and your configuration.
And how many devices you got hooked up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the big problem that we're seeing now, and we talk about this all the time, is almost everything that has a battery or a USB port or a plug in your house is connected to the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
So you have like 60 or 70 devices in your
I
house?
just did a count this morning to prepare. I have 70 devices. I got Roombas, I've got smart lighting, like everything.
Yeah. I live in a townhouse by myself, and I have almost 40 devices.
Yeah. And so if they're all connecting to your router, that's a lot of traffic going back and forth, and it does gum up the system. And that's why you potentially might want to look at a newer router that can handle the increased bandwidth, like the Wi-Fi 5s, or even better, the 6s, if you can get your hands on that.
Well, going back to my original point, though, I think the starting point is just to see what the vintage of the hardware that you have is. I've also seen some people with those giant blue Linksys routers still.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They're
those are old.
Like, don't use them anymore. They're not secure, for one, and two, they're not going to give you the same throughput that you would. A lot of times people are paying for a certain speed of internet, and they're only getting dial-up version of it.
Yeah.
So see what hardware you actually have from your provider.
So, like, how old would you go back to? Like 3 years, 4 years?
I think right now, like what I've been seeing with some friends is that if they have, say, Telus or Shaw or Rogers in other parts of the country, generally if you have a 4K box for your TV, then you probably are on newer hardware because they need more hardware for that or newer hardware for that. If you still have a non-4K TV and you haven't changed your box in a long time, chances are you probably have an older router.
Yeah, so if it's 3 or 4 years old, I would just phone your service provider and just say you want a new modem.
The big place to start, though, would be go to speedtest.net and see what your speed is actually on your router. Some of the internet providers have their own little apps, and like I know my Telus one, I can actually run a speed test from that. But that's the speed test based on where your router is in your house, not from your laptop or your phone in bed or some other place like that. So try it in a few different places around the house to see what your actual throughput is on speed test. But also try to do it if you can on the router itself, because then you at least know that the pipe coming to your house is what you're actually paying for.
Yeah. And you'd be surprised that a lot of times it's not giving you the speed that you're paying for.
Well, you had a problem with your Shaw setup.
Yeah, I'm not going for the highest because my kids are leaving the house now, so it's just my wife and I, and I download a few things, I stream some 4K stuff, but it's not like a huge need. But I was getting half, literally, of what I was paying for. Yeah. And I started noticing, especially on the uploads. Yeah. And anyway, I called them and said I want a new modem. Yeah. And they said no. But then I just kept pushing because they're trying to fix it. Yeah. Over the internet, and it just wasn't working. Right. And I kind of thought it was an old router.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. But didn't you end up also having a problem with the cabling that it was connected to? Like
Yes.
the cable between the router and your Wi-Fi setup, which
Yes.
we'll talk about these things in a minute.
Yeah.
But sometimes these cables, they just use whatever's handy, or maybe you did it.
Yeah.
Who knows? And
Could be.
it's can also be a bottleneck for that speed. So you want to sort of check all the different sort of points right back to the wall where the service comes into your house.
Yeah. So make sure you're getting the speed that
Yeah.
you're paying for, essentially.
Yeah.
And then if you're not, again, see if you can get a better router. And typically they combine the modem, the internet modem, whether that's like DSL or cable, and the router into one now.
Yeah. What I would do is, if you aren't sure, just look up the model of the box that you actually have on the internet.
Yeah.
You'll be able to see the vintage of it pretty quickly by just a simple Google search. Generally, a lot of the newer ones now are very tall and monolithic, and because they have lots of antennas in it, that's why.
Yeah.
And those ones are generally better than the old style, which were little flat rectangular boxes.
Yes.
So, but let's talk about some of the challenges that we have with Wi-Fi in your house, especially on a mixed network. And a mixed network is basically you have different devices that all have different sort of, I guess, quality of materials, but also the type of connections they're going to have. So your laptop, your game consoles, your desktop computers, those things,
TVs.
they're all going to have pretty decent antennas and everything like that in it. But your little small smart home devices, they may not have them. And a lot of times, smart home stuff still requires an older style signal.
Yeah.
And
The 2.4 gigahertz.
2.4 gigahertz.
We'll get into that.
Yeah, and your newer equipment will thrive on the faster equipment. But here's the rub. If you have one of those devices and your system is set up in such a way that you have both connecting at the same time, your speed's going to default to the slowest device,
Yes.
which is not good.
No.
So what you want to do ideally is to separate those things. And newer routers can do that.
Dual band, tri-band. Yes.
Yeah, just look for those type of terms, because that'll give you separate antennas for each of those bands. So you're not actually having to share that bandwidth with those other devices.
Yeah. So that's kind of an important thing, the dual band, the tri-band, and the frequencies. So in the old days, when these Wi-Fi routers were first coming out, they were the 2.4 gigahertz frequency, and that's how they're sending the information wirelessly, invisibly through space and time. And the challenge was that a lot of the other devices in your home, your cordless phones, your microwave, your wireless game controllers, unfortunately were on that same frequency. So, you know, in many cases there was interference with that.
Yeah.
And then if you're in an apartment building, God help you, because everyone else in the building is on that same frequency. So they did come out with 5 gigahertz, which was way better. It opened up obviously another channel. And now we're even looking at the latest standard, which we'll talk about in a bit, that gives you another one, 6 gigahertz. So, you know, the more channels you have like that, and just putting the different things in the different channels, it helps reduce the congestion.
Yeah, and that is the key there, is that congestion that can happen, because you're all the devices in your house are fighting for that one pipe. It's just like having a slow draining sink.
Yeah.
You're all trying to get onto the internet, and especially if you're doing things like Zoom, any kind of video conferencing, gaming, you're uploading and downloading at the same time. When you're streaming Netflix or something like that, you're only sort of downloading. So it's not as bad, but when you're uploading at the same time, that really impacts your throughput. And also, it depends on the type of service that you have. Things have gotten a bit better on all the different providers now, but there was a time when there was definitely a clear winner on the upload speed for, like, I know on Telus, whatever your internet provided speed was, is what your upload speed was.
It's not like that everywhere.
No.
Like, you know, if you're getting like 300 megabits or even a gigabit, a lot of times it's like a fraction of that. I think I have 25 megabits up.
But that's pretty standard for Shaw.
Yeah.
But on Telus, I have a gigabit pipe.
Download and up.
And up.
Yeah.
So,
Show off.
well, but I use it a lot.
Yeah, but
right?
not all providers are like that.
No, and so you really need to understand, and when you do those speed tests, it'll tell you what your upload is and what your download speed is.
And why should you care about the upload?
Because if you're gaming or if you're video streaming or doing any of those intense, even if you're just uploading a video to YouTube or Facebook even, that is going to take a lot longer and throttle your other connections in your house too.
Yeah, so if you're doing Zoom calls, in a lot of cases, if you're getting that bad reception, a lot of times it has to do with your upload speed.
Yeah.
So these were what the routers used to look like, and they still do.
Some of them still look like this one, yeah. And this one's actually a good one because you can actually see it's got this kind of alien-looking antenna structure, but each of these antennas is way better and bigger than what's inside the carrier-provided one.
Yeah.
And this one is, I think, a tri-band, if I recall what that one does.
But again, a lot of the newer packages that the carriers have, they've got the mesh networks. They're pretty good.
For most people, they're fine.
Yeah.
But if you're a heavy user, if you're a heavy gamer, or you do a lot of video conferencing stuff,
and you've got a lot of smart devices in your home, you might want to look at a mesh network.
Yeah, and those pucks, or whatever you want to call them, nodes, they come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes depending on the carrier.
Yep.
They will help. The big thing to remember is when you're in your house, anytime the wireless network goes through a wall or an appliance or a bathtub, anything like that, it degrades the signal quite a lot. So ideally, you're going to have extra pucks that you can throw around the house in those dead zones.
Yeah. And that's how a mesh network works, right?
Yeah.
You can get like a 2-pack, a 3-pack. You could even add a 4th one, and like you said, strategically put them upstairs, downstairs, just to bathe the house in Wi-Fi.
So in the past, though, people used extenders to do that. And we've got a couple different examples from a couple different vintages here, just as props more than anything. But the problem with an extender, at least the older ones, was that they would create their own network.
Yeah. And
so then when you go to connect your smart device, well, you've got like multiple networks.
2, 3 different networks. So the problem is, like, if you're moving around the house, maybe you had a laptop or a tablet, and you go to the spot where the extender or repeater is, it didn't always hand off.
Yeah, definitely the newer routers handle that much better, and now there's a lot of providers that are actually selling. They're not even calling them repeaters really anymore.
Yeah.
They're just basically, they have a basic router, and then you're essentially buying another node for it, and it turns itself into a mesh network.
Yeah. So again, the mesh network, definitely, if you've got a house that's more than a couple thousand square feet, it's really something serious that you should have a look at, because it's just going to solve a lot of problems. I know some people have some success with these repeater, these extenders, but more often than not, I get a lot of questions, and tech support questions on how to make these things work properly.
Well, and this one's a power over Ethernet.
Yeah, which is a whole other.
Yeah, so you can actually put your internet through your power lines, all the wiring that's in your house. You can actually, instead of having to drill a hole to send something into your son's room or something like that, you can just plug this in on one side, plug it into the outlet, and then on the other side do the same thing, and then you basically have kind of
like using the copper electrical wires as Ethernet cable, essentially.
Yeah.
And it actually, that works quite well. I've used that in the past, but to be honest, once I put a mesh network in, I didn't need these extenders or the power line adapters anymore.
One thing that we see a lot of times when people have things like NASs, basically network address storage, and so basically you've got like a little media server, say, that you connect to your TV so that you can watch your movies that you've downloaded or anything like that. The problem that a lot of people have with these sort of hybrid networks is that it'll maybe work from one machine but not from the other, because it's not a straight path, because it has to go through all this hardware. With the mesh network, when I installed that, I had zero problems on any of that stuff anymore. Because they just talk to each other much better. They overlap. It's like little umbrellas of Wi-Fi throughout your house, and it just bathes your house in that Wi-Fi, and it's all the same network.
Yes.
And the really cool thing about these mesh networks is, they come in different sizes. This is the latest, I think, from Eero, which is Amazon. And these things, you can sort of tuck them in a corner, but they all come with Ethernet ports on the back. And why that's important is that that gives you basically an extension that you can put anywhere you want to wirelessly and drop an Ethernet cable to something.
Maybe you want to hook that up to a game console or a TV.
Or maybe an old printer that doesn't work on Wi-Fi,
Yeah.
but it will work over the Ethernet,
Yeah.
those types of things. Because a lot of times these mesh networks will actually have a back channel that will be dedicated just for that Ethernet port. So it'll be a much faster throughput than just using regular Wi-Fi.
Yes, good point. And again, they do come in different shapes and sizes. Like Linksys has they look like little towers.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is that these kind of fit into the home decor much better than the alien design. And don't get me wrong, I love these. I think they're kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I'm nerdy. I like space. But these are more friendly for the home decor.
The other thing that we've seen in the last, I guess, while now is a lot of times the mesh networks will come with extra features. So I have TP-Links, and some of the higher end models, they actually come with smart home hubs.
Yep.
So any kind of smart home lighting or other devices you have that requires a hub, this actually...
Zigbee is a standard Z-Wave that some of these lights use. It'll actually be built into that, so you don't have this extra kind of dongle-y thing that you got to hook into the network.
Yeah, it'll just work with it, and then you actually have the benefit of using their app to control it then too.
Yeah. So again, the reason why you want to look at some of these newer routers, obviously to get the whole house covered properly, but also if you are starting to get into the smart home devices, you have to look at these Wi-Fi 6 routers because they can handle dozens of these different devices at the same time, which I think is important. You brought up a good point about the different frequencies. A lot of these smart devices, I know the Roombas, the robot vacuums, they only would work on 2.4 gigahertz frequencies.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you do invest in getting one of these mesh networks here, there's so many other features. You get so much more control, I find.
Yeah.
There's lots of good parental controls, security controls, and I love having the hub thing built into a lot of these.
Well, and the other thing that we used to have to do with some of these, maybe not this one, but an older style router was you have to go to a website to configure it. And you basically have to know Linux to get in there to do it. A lot of times now, these newer mesh systems, and even some of the non-mesh systems, they are all managed by an app.
Yeah, you just load it up on your Android or your iPhone, and it's actually pretty simple now, I find, to set these things up.
Because the other thing that the benefit of using those apps is that the app actually usually has a wizard that'll help you decide where in the house you should put these things.
Yeah.
And it'll actually help you test it to see if that's the good place for it.
Yeah.
And what I like about the apps is that if you have a parent or someone that just isn't technical, you can go set it up for them, and you can be the administrator via the app. And if they're having a problem with their internet, you can actually remotely reboot the router. You can do any configuration changes that they need, and even help them change the password if you need to do that.
So some quick tips here that I've learned over the years. If you are going to bypass the router that came from your internet service provider, it's still going to be part of your system because it's got the modem built into it, typically.
Yeah.
You are going to have to turn the router part into what's called a bridge.
Yes.
And so typically I've had to phone the provider to let them know that I'm doing that.
Yeah. I did it with my Telus router,
Yeah.
and I was able to do it myself.
Okay, but that's important because you can't have two routers giving out addresses to your laptops and your different smart devices. And that's what the router does. It's routing the traffic, giving each device its own address.
It's the equivalent of having two stoplights at an intersection that aren't in sync.
Yeah, one's green, one's red.
Yeah, so you
get crazy.
you need to separate them so that they send specific IP addresses to the specific networks that you're having. The way I have mine set up in my house, I have my Telus router and the extenders, or the repeaters, and that's one network that I've named.
Yes.
And then I have my other network, which is my TP-Link network,
Okay.
which I've named. And I know if something's going wrong with my TP-Link, that I can quickly just reboot that if I need to.
Yeah.
Or I can just, if I'm in the middle of something, I can just flip over to the Telus one and just use that.
That's a nerdy thing to do, though, to have two going.
It is.
Yeah.
But you already have it if you're using something in addition to the the carrier provided one. So again, things to think about.
So that routing system that we're talking about, where the router gives all those addresses to your Roomba, your laptop, your iPhone, that's something called DHCP. It's a really nerdy term, but essentially that is what the protocol is that are giving the addresses. And again, if you haven't bridged your original router, you can't have two routers giving out addresses because it just stops working.
Right, because then you'll have a collision on the network where Mike and our phones will both ask for the same IP address.
Yes.
And then I'll try to be doing something, and then your phone will try to do something, and it just won't work.
An interesting thing I actually learned, because I've got I'm always testing this stuff here. I was having problems with a lot of the smart Wi-Fi switch, the light switches. Apparently, it's better to have them in plastic boxes in the wall.
Yes.
In the old days, it was all metal, which is great. Metal's better for dissipating the heat, and these switches, there's a lot going on in them. So it's better that way, but that metal interferes with the Wi-Fi signal, if you're wondering.
In the same token, though, a lot of the newer buildings that are being built, they're using metal studs now instead of wood studs.
Perfect.
And so it turns your room into a little Faraday cage, which basically blocks signals from getting out.
Yeah.
So
and that's interesting, right? Because you would think in an apartment, you wouldn't need to have a mesh network.
Right.
But I know people in a one-bedroom apartment that have actually had to set up like a two-puck system in there just so they can get the signal into the bedroom because of all the crazy materials they're using in the buildings now.
Yeah, because you just don't know. And like I said, in a small place, and say you have like a little vertical washer dryer system, but it's right on the other side of where your router is, any Wi-Fi on the other side of that washing machine is going to be like half or a quarter of the signal strength of what it is in that other room.
Totally.
Just by going through the washing machine or a big bathtub enclosure, that type of thing.
So I would also recommend going into the router settings and learning what a lot of that stuff is, right? Like, don't be afraid to go in there and just start learning what the different terms are.
And the apps make it super easy now. They all have like a little help button or a little question mark you can tap on, and it'll explain what that feature or term is.
So like one thing that I use is something called QoS, or quality of service. You can actually dedicate certain devices in your home to get priority access to the Wi-Fi signal. So if you're having problems because you got like 5 people in the home and everyone's streaming stuff and online gaming, you can actually dedicate the Xbox to have priority over the laptop or any other device. Or maybe you want the TV to have priority because you don't want to have buffering,
right?
When you're watching Netflix or what have you. But that is a really cool feature. Again, if you've got lots of devices and lots of people using the internet at the same time.
And sometimes you can even schedule those things too, so that during the day it's all work, it's all Zoom, and then at night your Xbox gets the priority.
Yeah. And the cool thing too, we talked about the parental controls. Pretty well most of them have that built in now. So if you want to reduce your kids' screen time at night, that they're not TikToking at 3 in the morning, you can actually shut those devices' internet access off at like 11 at night, for example.
Yeah, although I think most kids are probably better at that than their parents are.
I know. I'm just throwing it out there. Yeah, they'll find ways, right? There's no question. But it's there as a tool if you're so inclined to try to outsmart the kids out there. So there's different Wi-Fi standards. In the past, they used these really stupid terms like 802.11b, 802.11g,
N and A,
AC. So anyway, they try to get smarter, and they've gone with like Wi-Fi 5. And Wi-Fi 6 is now the standard. But now they're making it confusing again because they've got Wi-Fi 6E.
Right.
And so that's kind of a whole new ballgame. I thought I was cool because I got a new Wi-Fi 6 router.
Yeah.
And now the 6E, I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I get that?
Well, the problem with the 6E though is, unfortunately, it was unveiled in the middle of the pandemic.
Yes.
And when there's a chip shortage, so not a lot of devices actually have support for 6E.
No.
And there's not a lot of 6E routers out there.
No, so 6E adds a whole new wrinkle. It gives you that extra frequency, which we were talking about before. So most routers now do 2.4, which is kind of the older standard, the most ubiquitous out there. 5 gigahertz, which way better. And now the 6E gives you the 6 gigahertz channel as well. So there's even less interference, and it just helps open up how many devices you can have going.
But we both agree, why didn't they just call it Wi-Fi 7 to make it easier?
Yes. So big point you brought up. To take advantage of like a Wi-Fi 6 or a 6E, your devices have to have that capability as well. Yes, they're all backwards compatible, right? Your 6 and 6E router will work with all the previous Wi-Fi devices, but if you want the fastest speeds and all the good stuff that comes with those new standards, your new iPhone or laptop or robot vacuum have to have that Wi-Fi 6 or 6E capability to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and
there's nothing 6E that I can think of right now.
No, not at all. And it sounds like they might even skip over and go to 7 just because as we get out of the chip shortage, things might be a little bit easier. And then the next round of device builds, like new MacBooks and those types of things, will all support that.
Yeah.
But like you said, they'll all work on it. Just it's not going to be as good, and you're not going to get the performance that you're paying that extra premium for with that new device. Because that's the thing is, some of these 6E routers are a bit of a premium price.
So we got a question from Dennis. I've got the Telus Boost Wi-Fi starter kit plus 2 expansion packs. Do each of these extenders / repeaters have to be in contact with the actual starter one that's hardwired to my Telus router? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So one of your little Wi-Fi mesh nodes.
The repeater looks like a little plate.
Yeah.
With a little kickstand.
Exactly. So it has to be hardwired into your modem, and that modem again could still have like a router built into it.
Well, I think with my Telus one, the one I have, the router is the starting point.
Is the base.
Yeah, and then the repeaters, they just need to be plugged in.
Yes.
And then you just add them in the app.
Yeah. You don't have to put one of these repeaters to that.
No.
To the base station.
Yeah. And my installer actually did that when he set up my fiber internet.
And so it works quite well, right, in your place?
It works okay.
Yeah.
Like I said.
Like, what's your complaint? I mean, you're nerdy.
Well, my complaint is that it does drop.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for no apparent reason. And I have one in every floor.
Have you been paying your bill?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Check it.
Yeah. I just find that, and like I said, I can tell when it drops because the internet stops working.
Yes.
And I see that the green, or I think it's a blue light on the Telus one, goes red, which means it's not talking to the base station.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, even my TV does that too. So, but I also have a 3-level townhouse, and my base station is in my garage, and I have a very thick floor in between. So that's part of the problem, which is why they gave me extra repeaters to fill up my levels so that it would be as good as it could be.
So let's look at some of these key points in summary. Make sure that you're getting what you pay for out of the gate, right?
Yes.
Check your internet speed. Make sure that if you're paying for 500 megabit download speed and 100 up, use these speed tests to make sure that the router to the internet is actually getting that speed to begin with.
Yeah, and make sure that all of the hardware and the cabling you have between however it gets into your house and to the router is newer cables.
Yes.
And like quite often, like back in the day when you would get a new, say, coax cable TV, they'd bring in really beefy cables, not the dollar store specials that you would have, right? So that's the same problem with this. You have a cheap Ethernet cable going from your modem to your router. That's going to be the bottleneck.
Yeah, the cables, those Ethernet cables, they look like giant telephone jack.
Yeah.
They actually have different speed ratings. And so I have found in the past that I had a problem, and I monkey around for hours going through the settings thinking that's the problem, and then I'm thinking it's the router. It ended up being the stupid cable.
Well, in a lot of houses, these, or at least for a while, I don't know if they're still doing it, were pre-wired with the slower speed cables. Yeah. So if you can avoid pressing or using those cables, I would try.
It's tough if you're wired.
Right. Well, that's just it. I mean, you're going to get what you're going to get, and that's probably the best you're going to get.
Okay, so make sure you're getting what you're paid for. Make sure that you've got the latest gear from your provider as well. If it's more than like 4 years old, give them a call. You're paying good money. They will typically upgrade the router for you. For homes that have Wi-Fi dead spots, there are extenders, repeaters that you can buy to kind of add range to your existing router, but I would look at these mesh network packs now. It just makes it so much easier, like instead of futzing around.
Yeah, I just find the repeaters are just nothing but frustration. You just plug a mesh in and add it to the app, and then you're good to go.
And so, a lot of manufacturers, TP-Link, they actually make, these, traditional looking routers, but they do have mesh capability. So if it's not giving you enough signal, you can then go buy an extra little node or puck.
Yeah, and you don't have to spend $500 for these things either.
Yes.
Like I know this one, this is the Deco M5. These go on sale all the time on Amazon.
Yeah.
Like a 2-pack for like $100.
Yeah.
And I bought a 2-pack with a buddy because he has the same system.
Oh.
And we shared
You
it.
split a pack.
Yeah, because I don't think they had singles in stock at the time.
Yeah.
And it was a better deal to get the 2-pack that was on sale. So.
And get to know your router. Like actually go into the settings and just look and see what's going on. Make sure that there's no weird devices that are connecting to your internet.
Well, that's probably could be someone in your neighborhood, especially if you live in an apartment building or a condo.
Yeah.
Someone in your neighborhood could have figured out your internet password and be leeching your internet off of you, and that's why you have slow bandwidth.
Yes. So, and that was one thing I think we forgot to say. Make sure you have a good password on your system, right? Because that is the gateway into your home
and all your equipment. I used to hate when people would you go to someone's house and well, what's the Wi-Fi password here? And then well, let me go to the router and look at the sticker that's on the bottom because they never changed it. I'm like, well, you can change. It doesn't have to be Telus 12345 as your Wi-Fi. You can change. That's called the SSID or the network name. But you can also change the password to maybe something more meaningful. But make sure it's a secure password if you're going to do that.
We got Rock96. I don't think I need a mesh network in my house. Would it be worth it to get Shaw's puck or better to get an extender? I'm checking out TP-Link AC2600 or AC1700. So I don't, as far as the puck, if he's already got the blue curve or the whatever system they're calling it, just get a puck.
It depends on what the price is, because I think sometimes it depends on your plan, you have to either rent those pucks or it's an additional fee that you have to give back when you change providers.
Yeah.
So it depends. If the puck is basically free or very low cost, like $5 a month or something, that might be worth it. But also don't forget, if it's $5 a month
times,
and you forget about it and you're using it for
24 months, it starts adding up. There's $120 over 2 years.
Right. You could just buy a mesh network.
Yeah. So just check on the pricing on that, because you got to. And again, I'm thinking you already have Shaw's mesh system there.
Yeah.
If you're going to a whole other router, then that's a whole cost in itself.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. So it just depends on how your plan is structured, and if you call them and you just sort of complain about it, they might even just give it to you for free to make you a happy customer.
Yeah. They want customers right now. Trust me.
Because all the carriers right now are dealing with churn, which is basically. And this happened to me, and Mike's threatened to do it a few times, is you just get frustrated with the service, or you see a better deal on another carrier, so you're going to switch. And they don't like that, because they like having the largest and most popular network in the country.
Yeah. So good point on that. If you haven't talked to them for a few years, do some homework, see what the competitor is charging, and go back to them, phone them and say, hey, I need a better deal. But when you do that, make sure you've done your homework. Make sure you know what the competitor is charging now. Make sure you know what they're offering out in the marketplace as well. You would be surprised at how much money you can save. I did that for my parents with their provider. I literally cut their bill in half.
Yeah, well, and for me, I switched to Telus because I was on the Telus network, and I actually saved additional monthly fees because I was already bundling, basically.
Yeah.
So, but if you don't talk to them regularly, or you haven't talked to them since maybe you switched to their cellular service, you can probably bundle that, save some money, maybe even get faster internet out of the deal, and end up paying less money.
Phone them. Do your homework first, but phone them. You will be super surprised at how often you can really cut the bill down. I did it with mine as well. I had a bunch of bundled things. And I cut mine in half, literally. So that's a big thing.
We got a question
One more
about
question here,
getting rid of the Shaw modem router to start a mesh. No, you need to keep you just need to get the service into your house from Shaw in this case. That is going to basically, you're going to take an Ethernet cable, you're going to plug it into the Shaw modem and plug it into one of these guys then.
Yeah.
And this will be your mesh.
And then puck your house.
Yeah.
Essentially. Unless the Shaw modem router you have is is their mesh network.
Yeah, I think it's called Blue Curve, but they keep changing the name. I can't keep up.
You should just keep with one name on that. But it's again, if it's not the Shaw mesh network they have, you still have to keep that modem because, like you said, the internet has to come in.
Yeah, I can't stress enough though what you just said about calling them, because I've had a few friends that are like, oh, I'm just pay it. I mean, it just works. I don't have to, everything's fine, but they've been overpaying for the service for years.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, they're not even getting what they're paying for because their bandwidth is so crappy.
Yeah. One more question here. M. Krishnan, following up on his previous question, is that a hub?
It's not a hub.
No.
No.
No. Okay, if you like this live stream, we've got lots of great other videos up on our website. We're always looking at the latest routers. You can check out some of those video reviews and overviews. And if you like it, hit that like button and subscribe. We would love to have more subscribers. It helps us make more content. And comment. Let us know what you want to hear.
Or what kind of topics we should cover in future live streams.
Again, I'm Mike Agarbo, John Beeler signing off. We'll see you again next time.